Better late than never. We are on the air for Wrestling Roundtable Radio. Number to call, 347-857-4647. I'm the host, Eric Santamaria. On with me right now is Rodney LeConte. Hey, yo, Rod.
Hey, yo, Eric. How you feeling, man?
Exhausted, as you can imagine. Let's let everyone know, Rodney, how the taping went on Sunday. A couple days ago, we taped our last two shows of the season. The topics discussed were best and worst debuts and returns, putting those two together as a tag team, so to speak, along with best and worst makeovers. On the first show and the second show, we looked at the WWF's New Generation time period between 1994 and 1996, because after discussing the Attitude Era for an entire show, which people seemed to enjoy, people wanted us to go back for the time period before, a tumultuous time for WWF, a lot of turmoil and a lot of things breathing down their neck, whether it was WCW with Monday Nitro, they were in the post-steroid time, they were losing a lot of our generation's demographic in the fan base, people were turning out, and it was an interesting time period for sure. But that, coupled with the submission round Q&A, complements the whole theme of our past couple season finales, which have been fan-driven content. You choose what we talk about. So those were the two shows. How'd it go?
I thought they went really well. I enjoyed talking about the new generation because, to me, that was one of my favorite eras in wrestling. I don't know why everybody stopped watching, because to me that's when the most stars were made, when such big names as Hogan, Savage, and Warrior all around. The WWF really took a chance on all these guys, and these guys took the company, carried it on their back through tough times, and are still big names today. So I can't see that as being dark times in wrestling, because to me it's when the most names were made in wrestling.
Well, we're going to take a more detailed approach, a more detailed look at that, and you'll be seeing those shows starting later this week. However, tonight, we've got a lot to talk about between mixed martial arts and professional wrestling. Again, the number is 347-857-4647, and you can also join the live chat on WrestlingRoundtable.com, which is, of course, your hub for everything Wrestling Roundtable. You can get the links to all our social networking sites, MySpace, Facebook, Twitter, as well as our profiles and accounts on Go Fight Live and iTunes. And don't forget WrestlingRoundtablePodcast.com. So, big weekend in mixed martial arts. This past Thursday at the Leah Corus Center in Philadelphia, I attended the Bellator 33 Fighting Championships, headlined by the big welterweight clash between the champion Eddie Alvarez and Roger Huerta. Ended up not being a title match, but
just
that's
lightweight.
The lightweight match between Eddie Alvarez and Roger Huerta. Excuse me, Rodney. There were so many welterweight matches that night. It was easy to get confused there. I actually said it felt like night of the welterweights. But going first to the welterweight championship, Ben Askren, someone described to me as a prodigy, win over Lyman Good. How'd you think of that as a fellow wrestler, Rodney?
Since I saw him last season, he's definitely one of my favorite guys to watch. I mean, the fans might not like his style, but I think that his takedowns are phenomenal. A lot of people compare him to Josh Koscheck, saying he's the next Josh Koscheck. The way he uses wrestling, the way he controls his opponents, and a tough guy, a really world-class guy like Lyman Good, he really made his ground game look like nothing. He shows he could take a lot of hits. He took that one up kick from Lyman Good that put him down, but he passed the guard almost immediately after that. This guy's tough. I mean, he doesn't look like a big welterweight. He actually looks like he could fight at lightweight, but to beat top competition like that, I would love to see this guy's future.
There were a couple good sprawl defenses early on, I believe, in the first round, but once Askren got him on the ground, he had nothing, and it was almost as if Askren was just rolling around and passing guard and switching positions like at will. He didn't have enough power to finish him with any hammer fists or strikes at that point, but that up kick, holy shit.
Yeah.
If his arm didn't move a second after hitting the canvas, that could have been an easy knockout right at the end.
Yeah, I thought he was out. I was actually surprised that he kept going. The ref was good, I guess he saw life in aspirin and did not stop the fight right away.
Moving on to the main event, the lightweight super fight. Roger Huerta challenging Eddie Alvarez, the lightweight champion of Bellator, and just quickly summarize the fight, Eddie Alvarez fucked Roger Huerta up. What did you think, Roger?
Yeah, to say the least. I was really interested in this fight. I've heard a lot of Eddie Alvarez. I've seen a lot of his stuff online. This is my first time actually seeing him on TV. And wow, what an ass whooping. This guy really showed why he's one of the best lightweights outside of UFC. Dana White has talked highly of him. I would love to see him in the UFC because, say what you will about other organizations. Everybody knows to really prove yourself as a top pound-for-pound fighter, you have to be in the UFC. And I would love to see how he does against the top lightweights in that division. But, back to the match, you got to give props to Roger Huerta, too, for sticking in there as long as he did for the 2 rounds. He was basically hopping on one leg after the first minute, but those leg kicks, I felt him from here. I felt him from Jersey. He could do it all. Roger
Huerta looked afterwards as if he had been in a street fight, except, of course, this time it didn't come out so well.
Yeah, this time this guy knew what he was doing.
Mm-hmm. From there, we move on to the Strikeforce show on Showtime, the latest Challenger show. Rod, how was that?
It was pretty decent. There was a women's match that caught everyone's eye. Shayna Olsen, undefeated, faced Julia Budd, who was a Muay Thai specialist. It was an MMA debut, 145 pounds. Julia actually beat Gina Carano in a Muay Thai match, so saying. And Julia ended up finishing Olsen due to strikes. This is the girl's first professional fight, and already, I don't know why, but Strikeforce is goofy enough to already ask this girl how she'd size up Cyborg, and how long do you think it'll take for her to get to a title shot? Title shot? Excuse me? Title shot? A woman like Cyborg, who is destroying all these seasoned veterans, this girl has one match, and you already want to throw her to Cyborg? You talk about rushing any potential stars.
Yeah, who do they think she is? Brock Lesnar?
Exactly. She's no Brock Lesnar. See what she has against other competition first. That's the thing with Strikeforce. They don't allow their divisions to get deep. Yeah, to develop. Actually, the main event with Roger Bowling and Bobby Volker was probably one of the best fights I've seen all year. These guys went at it toe-to-toe. Undefeated Roger Bowling ended up winning the fight. But, overall, it was a decent show, especially since I forgot it was on until about 2 minutes before it started.
Seems as if pound for pound, so to speak, these challenger shows end up having better action than a lot of the main cards that Strikeforce has been putting on Showtime.
Yeah, they get some decent fights. It was funny because the first fight was a heavyweight fight between Brandon Cash, which you could tell by the commentary was someone that they're really trying to season as one of their big stars. He ended up getting choked out, which I thought was pretty funny, by John Devine. And you kind of felt the tone go down in the commentators, which I think was pretty funny to show us the bias sometimes. But still a decent fight, decent card.
All right. Let's move on to the big dogs. Backtracking a little bit to the other weekend, UFC 120 out of England. It's had a very odd place in the pecking order, and we talked about it before on the last radio show here on Blog Talk Radio. Do you think it delivered, Rodney? Because, I don't know, doesn't seem like people were too blown away by this card.
How could you? It was just really bad timing, especially with the 121 card. The hype behind that, I think UFC was really putting most of their gems in the 121 card. The 120 was almost the appetizer to the main course for 121, we could say. The England cards, yeah, they get Michael Bisping, but, there were no names to really catch the casual audience, really draw a strong rating for Spike. But, again, this was a better card than people thought. The main event and the co-main event, I thought, really drove home this event. And for free TV, I'll take it, and it definitely wasn't bad.
Well, do you think that the officiating was bad in the heavyweight bout between Chet Congo and Travis Brown? Because That seems what a lot of people were up in arms about, that the officiating was just awful, and that's what led to the draw decision.
Officiating how? I mean, they did take a point away from Congo. I think, if anything, it was the performance of both fighters.
Well, they were saying that he should have taken more points away because Congo was just being ridiculous.
Well, I mean, what are you going to do? The fight itself really got ridiculous at one point. You really have to question what the hell Congo was thinking. I mean, this guy isn't new to the game. He knows what to do, what not to do, what you can't do.
Not only is he not new to the game, he's not particularly in a position to be having this on his reputation, because you'd almost think that he'd be on the outs, if not now, really soon.
Yeah, I mean, he's never going to be the top 5 in UFC. I mean, yeah, he had a streak before Cain Velasquez stopped that. Frank Mir put an exclamation point on that. Chet Congo, he really had a lot of chances to end this fight. Travis Brown was swinging wildly. There were times where he had his hands down, and Chet Congo just didn't pull the trigger. And really, it's things like that that made the difference between a top 5 fighter and just another contender. If he has another performance like that, he might not even be a UFC contender anymore.
There's not much more to say about it because it didn't last very long. But in the welterweight division, Carlos Condit knocking out Dan Hardy, I particularly enjoyed that because I'm not a big Dan Hardy fan. Essentially, if your last name is Hardy, I don't like you very much. That seems to be the theme throughout the show.
So Dan Hardy is the one Hardy I do like. I like his charisma, his introductions. But
is he an enigma?
Yeah. For Carlos Condit to call out Dan Hardy, go to Dan Hardy's hometown in England, and knock him out in front of his home people just says a lot about Carlos Condit and him growing in the welterweight division. I thought it was an exciting fight. Dan Hardy's only loss was to GSP, and he hung in there 5 rounds. So I honestly thought that Dan Hardy was going to win via decision. I did not expect Dan Hardy to get knocked out, and it was a pleasant surprise. Carlos Condit looks good, shows that him training with Greg Jackson has been only positive. I want to see where this guy goes from here. I think he's definitely in the mix. Definitely put him in the mix, man, because when you knock out a guy like Dan Hardy who just fought George St. Pierre for 5 rounds, you definitely make a statement and you open up some eyes.
Definitely, because he did, in the first round, what GSP, the champion, couldn't do in all 5 championship rounds, and that's finish Dan Hardy. Moving on to the light heavyweight division in the main event, Michael Bisping, unanimous decision over Yoshihiro Akiyama. Do you think that Sexyama has underperformed in his UFC career so far, like numerous other Japanese fighters before him?
No, because this guy had 3 UFC fights, and all of them have been fight of the night. So I can't say he's been underperforming. It was a pretty exciting fight. It's just Michael Bisping really just pushed the pace. Akiyama, he just tires out. I don't know if he overtrains or I don't know what the weight cut does for him. He doesn't seem like a very big 185er. He looks like he could even drop down to welterweight if he really wanted to. Even with the last fight with Chris Lieben, second round, this guy seems to just really gas out, and he has his hands down a lot. But UFC is going to keep him around. He's an entertaining fighter, and people are still going to watch him.
Jay Aletto. Hello, Jay.
What's happening, Eric? I thought Bisping looked really good. That he was really fast, pushed the pace constantly, just in and out on Akiyama. Didn't let him take control of the fight at all. I love seeing Dan Hardy get knocked out. That's always a plus for me because that guy, to me, is just a piece of shit. Talks too much trash. And it wasn't really too of an exciting card. The UFC has been pumping out the pay-per-views lately, so that's probably has something to do with it.
Speaking of pumping out the pay-per-views, we're going to move a week later to this past Saturday for UFC that I expect, if not equaling, at least Mosley Mayweather may, in fact, have exceeded it for at least the biggest bought show of the year. But before we move on to the main card, Will Valfides. Hello, Will.
Hello to all my fans on Blog Talk Radio.
Right off the bat, Brendan Schaub defeating Gabriel Gonzaga by decision in the heavyweight division. Wow. Underwhelming, I think, would definitely be the term here because it seemed as if all the action happened at the end of the round for each one. He knocked him down. Oh, he took him down. Oh, guillotine. And then the bell would ring. Do you think Gabriel Gonzaga, much like Czech Congo, as you mentioned before, doesn't have that much left before he might get the slip?
Oh, yeah, man. Same old story with him lately. He's been pretty much having the same fight over and over and over again. He had a good shot at winning this fight, and I was pretty disappointed he didn't put out a better showing. But, yeah, before that flip, he could have had a good shot at it.
I think he still has a couple more fights in him. I don't think he's just done yet. I mean, Trot had a very good night. You know, he's building himself up pretty well. He's still got some more fights in him. I mean, he hasn't been doing too hot lately. He was a little bit slower, a little bit older. This was just a bad night for him. Overall, no one was really dominant in the fight.
If this is my first time watching a Gabe Gonzaga fight, and you told me that this guy was the number one contender like 3 years ago, there's no way I believe you. Definitely didn't look like the Gonzaga who knocked out Cro Cop.
Now, we always see that highlight in hype videos, obviously because it should be, but when you see that, especially on this night, you're like, wow, that guy, we haven't seen him in a long time.
Yeah, ever since he got by Fabricio Verdum, I don't think this guy's been the same. He had a good little streak going on. Shane Carwin, with that knockout punch, Gonzaga just hasn't been the same. Junior Dos beat him up pretty bad, and now you have Ultimate Fighter contender. I honestly thought Brendan Shaw was going to be the next man to knock him out. This guy just does not use his strength. Yeah, he's a high-level jiu-jitsu black belt, but I think you have to take the guy on the ground first before you start using that jiu-jitsu.
A lot of people were saying that the only good fight of that night, at least for the pay-per-view portion of the card, was Diego Sanchez defeating Paulo Thiago. Would you agree with that, Rodney?
Oh, come on, because the main event wasn't exciting.
Well, exciting and, well, okay, I'll let you talk.
This was definitely a fight of the night. I was really surprised by Diego's performance. I thought Paulo Thiago was going to squeeze a victory out of this one. But Diego showed this is why he is the nightmare. He really looked probably the best I've seen him. He used his striking very well. His grappling has definitely improved. He neutralized Thiago. That he had that big slam that reminded me of Matt Hughes and Frank Trigg too. It was a really exciting fight. A few times I thought Thiago was going to get that dark stroke, but Diego fought out of that. These two matched up very well, where towards the first round, I really did not know. At the end of the first round, I really didn't know who was going to win. And then the third round, I think Diego felt confident. He finished the fight, and he finished it in good form.
I agree. I thought, again, the first round wasn't all that, but the second and third round were really, really exciting. The card wasn't exciting at that point, and that was definitely one of the best fights, at least I've seen when I watch. I thought it was very exciting to watch. Like when you saw the big slam, everybody was like, whoa, we got to really pay attention. Yeah, I was actually very happy with the fight. Very exciting. It might even be the best match on the card, but only, as far as an MMA standpoint, but it wasn't like the money draw, like Lesnar and Kane was.
Much like Rodney alluded to, Jay, people were saying that this is the best Diego Sanchez has looked, maybe ever. What do you think?
I agree. Diego really needed to win this fight after losing 2 in a row. When he entered UFC, he was pretty much, one of those guys that everybody had a high expectation for, and he really lived up to it. But he didn't look too great against BJ Penn or John Hathaway. This fight, he really needed it to cement himself as a UFC standout and a guy they can rely on to put on a good performance each time he's out there. So it was a great fight. I thought Paulo Thiago was gonna catch him with a submission at some point in that fight, though, but Diego was just too good on that night, and it definitely deserved fight of the night.
Welterweight fight between Jake Shields and Martin Kampmann. Supposed to be the showcase fight for the former Strikeforce champion, Jake Shields, coming over. Dropping from the middleweight division, having just beaten Dan Henderson there, defending his title. Now he's at welterweight, and I don't think that people were too blown away by his performance, being that the winner of this fight was supposed to face the winner of GSP Koscheck coming up in December. What do you think, Jay?
Jake Shields looked good after watching the fight for the second time. At first, when I watched it, I thought maybe Kampmann could have taken the decision, but after watching it the second time, Shields definitely looked like he won the fight. He did enough to win it. That last round was a little bit shaky for him because you could tell he was gassed. The weight drop kind of wore him down a little bit. Is he ready to jump up fight the winner of GSP Koscheck? I don't know. People are saying he's next in line, but I'm just not sure about that. I would like to see him fight one more time in that division.
I haven't really watched him. So, again, to a point where if you watch the guy the first time and you're telling me he's a former champion, you wouldn't see it. This was, again, one of those, things, same thing. I mean, honestly, I know the guy dropped, changed weight class. He's not in the same shape as he used to be, so it's probably a little bit different for him. I don't know if he's ready for a title match yet. I don't know if it would be that exciting. No one really was. It didn't seem the crowd was excited.
I don't care, who you are, and I'm not making excuses for anybody, but when you drop 20 pounds the day before you weigh in, it's going to affect you. And the first time you fight in UFC, people talk about the UFC jitters. It's going to affect you. And you saw the case with Jake Shields tonight. Cesar Gracie said it. And for a guy to fight someone with the ability, the skill of Martin Kampmann, and to be looking at the clock, second round, and still pull off a win, that says something about someone's heart. People saying that Martin Kampmann should have won, I like to see what fight they're watching, because I saw Jake Shields control everything on the ground. You're not going to get any Anderson Silva striking out of this guy. He knows his strengths, but he has a way to neutralize someone striking. He gets close, he takes you down, and he works his game, and that's why this guy's won 15 in a row. And we're not talking about 15, amateurs here. We're talking about 15 of the best that any organization he's fought for has thrown at him. Hopefully he, gets his diet right. He's over the UFC jitters. We'll see if he's ready for a GSP. I don't think so. I'd like to see him go up against a Koscheck, a Fish, maybe even a Carlos Condit. So, we'll see where UFC could take him.
Well, Shields won by split decision, which I think is a little more fair assessment than to just say Martin Kampmann just won straight out. However, Matt Hamill defeated Tito Ortiz by unanimous decision, and I don't think you enjoyed that performance too much, did you, Rodney?
No. Say what you want about Tito. I'm still a Tito fan. I guess I'm so optimistic with certain fighters where I feel like, oh, man, this guy gets surgery. He's going to do better. Oh, man, this guy's going to this camp. He's going to do better. All right, this guy's working on his boxing. This guy's to do better. I thought a heel to Tito, we might see remnants of the Tito that me and you saw Eric beat the shit out of Ken Shamrock 8 years ago. But
a generation ago at this point.
Yeah, and let me repeat myself. That was 8 years ago. He didn't look bad. He didn't look bad, but he looked like he was in another world of wrestling. He said he has to work on his wrestling again. I just want to see him get his hand raised. I didn't know where this fight would go. Maybe after the first round was over, I really didn't have big hopes for Tito.
Jay Leto.
What I want to know is what's next for Tito. What do they do with him next? Are they going to put him back into Forrest Griffin for a third fight? That's what I'm thinking about. I'm not sure what he's going to do. Matt Hamill's just moving up the card. I think he's more of the story in this fight. Besides for that one loss, well, he didn't even lose the fight technically, but he got beat up by John Jones. Matt Hamill looks pretty good, and he's the story here, and we'll see if he can eventually get a shot at the title if he runs off a win or two more. But what do they do next with Tito? That's my question.
A very good question. Will Vafidas?
I'm a very big fan of Matt Hamill. I always was, watching the show and The Ultimate Fighter. Very disappointed in the match because I've seen most of his fights. He's really awesome. I'm surprised it was not like one of the top ones on the card. But what an inspiration that kid is, and if he does get a title shot, it will be a really great moment to see him win it. But it was definitely not as fun fight. And again, Tito is starting to kind of lose his edge a little bit. I'm not a huge fan of Tito. He's kind of losing it. I don't know where he goes from here.
Well, I know where we go from here, and that is to the big main event. Second undefeated prospect in a row that Brock Lesnar had to defend his belt against, and unlike the first time, a few months ago against Shane Carwin, he could not withstand the assault. First round TKO with about a minute left, and there went our boy. As you may have heard if you listened last week, we had originally planned on doing a blog after the show, but I don't think anyone was really in a mood to talk after our boy lost. Was it very surprising, though, Rodney? Cain Velasquez, unlike Carwin, was a little faster, and we'd seen a little more diversity from this All-American wrestler as well. So were you particularly surprised, though, with Velasquez's victory, or did you think Brock might pull it off?
I don't want people thinking that I hate Cain Velasquez, because I do like him, but not against Brock. I knew he had great hands. I was hoping that Brock was able to get past that and, train more of his hands, especially after the Carwin fight. The way Brock rushed him, and I could tell once he took Velasquez down and wasn't able to hold him down, I thought, oh shit, this isn't good.
Especially because he's bigger.
Exactly. That's his bread and butter. Take the guy down, hold him down, take away the guy's will, and pound him out. And even after the second time, I think the second one mostly, when Kane pretty much bounced right back up like a rubber ball, I knew that this was not going to be easy for Brock, and I think he got very discouraged from that. People talk about if he could take a hit. I think he can, but it's something about his fighting style where he's just really afraid to, and he really doesn't like to. In this sport, you really have to learn how to get hit because it's going to happen, and you have to withstand it. And sometimes you really got to question Brock's training camp. Are they bringing in good guys he could train with? They make comparison today, like in football camp, where the quarterback, the guys don't really tackle the quarterback because they don't want him to get hurt. You have to wonder, in Brock's camp, are people not going as hard against Brock because they want to keep him safe? This is Brock's camp. Everyone caters to Brock. I really think that this guy should bring in more people, bring in more talented training partners. Chris Tucker isn't the best fighter. He's been knocked up by Gonzaga, knocked up by Brandon Schaub. Cole Conrad, he's not very experienced.
He's just getting started in MMA himself.
Exactly, and when you get started, you really should be training against more experienced people in order to help you expand your game. And I think Brock really needs to put the gloves on, put the tie pads on, get some better people in there, bring in some boxers, whatever he needs to do to learn how to get hit, because that's definitely his weakest point. He's been exposed, but I think it's going to come back. I think it's going to come back from it.
I hope he does too, but along with what you're saying, maybe it's not even so much the people that he's bringing in, maybe it's perhaps what they're teaching him, because you said the bread and butter of Brock Lesnar's MMA career so far has been ground and pound after a takedown, and it seems as if that's all he wants to do. Now, granted, in the Carwin fight, he did absorb the punches in the first round. He came back and finished him on the ground, so good that he was able to submit him on the ground. However, his stand-up here was just driving me nuts, Jay. I don't know about you, but it seems as if boxing is possibly his weakest point. He did throw a couple knees, so that's good, but it was just driving me nuts how he didn't have his hands protecting his face. What about you?
Yeah, me too, man. I thought Brock would be boxing relatively his entire training camp after what happened with Carwin. I thought that's what he would focus on. But if you watch UFC Primetime, which most of you probably did because it was the highest-rated one of all time, it didn't seem like he was doing a lot of sparring at all. It was mostly conditioning and weight training. And I don't know what UFC edited out of it. I don't know what they showed, what they didn't want to show. But it really looked like he wasn't working on his hands that much at all. And when you're going against a guy like Velasquez, who has just pounded these guys in the past, like Ben Rothwell, Nogueira, that's what you need to do. That's what you need to focus on. And I think Brock's attempt to avoid that was just bull rushing him like fucking Donkey Kong or whatever in the beginning, just try to run him over and get him down and not let him throw any fists at him. Brock's really got to go back to the drawing board. He might have to get the fuck out of Alexandria, Minnesota, and go train in some other camps. Actually, he could help a lot of other fighters, too, being such a big guy. You know, he could help other fighters with their training. So is he interested in that? I don't really know. He's got a big ego. He's got a lot of money. It remains to be seen.
Lesnar does what he wants, essentially.
Yeah, he does. He really does. I think the story here, more than Brock being disappointing and getting rocked and hit on the chin numerous times, the story is more Cain Velasquez and just how good he looked and how calm he was. And,
it was a big stark contrast to how Lesnar looked.
Absolutely. Like Rodney said, I have nothing against Cain Velasquez, man. I'm actually really happy for the guy. And this could be truly a new era in the UFC heavyweight division. Like, this guy could really run through the division if he wants to. That's what it seems like anyway, but it all remains to be seen.
Well, he's got Junior Dos Santos next. That's going to be a big bang-out fight, to say the least, but what do you think, Will Vafidez, on this whole thing? Was your favorite part of the fight watching Brock roll around the mat like a car in an accident?
Oh, man, that sucked. I was not happy at all because so much hype. We were all on our feet because we were all watching it. We were on our feet. We were shocked. We couldn't, like you said, we couldn't even do a show. We were so upset. Like, that was how upset we were. Like, I left and I went home. I was so pissed. He'll be back. He does have to work on his striking game. He's definitely got the wrestling. He couldn't take Kane down. Or he took him down, but he got right back up. We're probably going to see a Lesnar Mirror 3. That's the whole rumor. Mm-hmm. You know, that's the rumor that the match will be, which I don't mind seeing. That match can main event a UFC 121, and more people would watch it more than Kane, Velasquez, and Cro Cop.
Like, well, I don't know about that.
Well, then we have to compare the buys. If that happens, then we have to compare the buys because I think they will. I think there's more money in Brock Lesnar than both of those men. I don't care who you...
Lesnar's a draw, but I do think that Velasquez is going to play a key role in what they hope to be international expansion, specifically to Mexico. The first Mexican heavyweight champion ever in combat is a great notch on UFC's belt.
Yeah, that's the one thing I have to say that this helps them is that it does help them expand their international market now that they have that. So, yeah, I definitely think that's going to help them. You know, but Lesnar may not be in UFC. He might be somewhere else in March.
I seriously doubt it, but we'll get to that in a few minutes. Amato.
Hey, guys. What they've been doing with The Undertaker since he retired Shawn Michaels and how they had the storyline with Kane going on. And just because he has the Rotator Cuff and, like I mentioned, the tease with Brock and what they want to do with him. But, you know, where would the storyline be right now if Taker took all of that time off and Shawn was around? How, like, would WWE ratings be in a better state? You know, maybe if y'all might want to kind of do that later. But as far as, you know, Brock, I was yelling at the computer, "Get up, Brock, come on, Brock." And as soon as he took that big hit to the jaw, and he was trying to pedal back, and he slipped it on the floor, he fell. As soon as Velasquez got on top of him, I mean, I knew Lesnar was in trouble, and he got that cut on the eye. I mean, up right on the cheek. I was like flabbergasted. I didn't think it was going to be that fast. Maybe he would have gotten to the. Maybe, you know, if Brock would have rushed him the way he did in the first and second, you know, he might have gotten it. And I always, you know, I thought, you know, Velasquez had it if he went into the third or fourth or fifth because, you know, his cardio is really good, you know, coming from AKA.
And also not having to carry that much weight around as compared to Lesnar. And we'll get to your Shawn Michaels question a little later when we get into pro wrestling. 706 area code. You're on with Wrestling Roundtable, so name and location, please.
It's Abe from Augusta, Georgia.
Hello, Abe. We did one of your questions, I believe, on the Q&A. And incidentally, if we did not get to one of your questions on the Q&A, we will be following up whenever that show airs on YouTube and all our other sites like Go Fight Live. On the radio show, we're going to be following up on those topics, get your thoughts, and a lot of questions left over that we did not have time to get to. So, Abe, what do you got?
Well, I have a view on the Kane Undertaker story and on the Bragging Rights. You want me to get into it now, or you want to wait till you get into it later, sir?
Let's hold off on that a little bit. I'll put you on hold, and we'll bring you back for that, because we will be getting to Bragging Rights a little later on. Ryan from Massachusetts. Hello, Ryan.
I'm just disappointed in Lesnar. There's nothing more to say to that. Going back to 120, I'm the only American that likes Bisping, just throwing that out there. Bisping did pretty good in that fight, but we all know it's just a common cycle in Bisping too, where he gets this win, then they're going to pretty much feed him to the top-tier talent. He's going to fight one of the top guys, lose, go down, work his way back up, fight a top guy, lose, work his way back up. I hope that he finally breaks the glass ceiling, beats somebody worth beating. I look forward to it. I'm a big Bisping fan. Without anybody else on this continent that it seems.
Michael Bisping, you're not alone. You have fans. Well, Amato brought up The Undertaker, and oh boy, a lot of talk about The Undertaker in the past couple of days, specifically with Brock Lesnar. Now, I saw the video on our message board, which you can sign up for at WrestlingRoundtable.com. Someone posted the video, and all this buzz, Undertaker, Lesnar, WrestleMania, that's what they want to do. And all our favorite wrestling journalists have jumped on that. I think it's really much ado about nothing. People in wrestling or who follow wrestling are just of the mindset that everything is a work, everything's a setup, and this may very well be, who knows. But the way it came off to me was, after reading about it first, everyone's like, ooh, Lesnar and Undertaker, confrontation, WrestleMania maybe, blah, blah, blah. And then I watched, I was like, you really got all of that from that. One, 2-second, I don't even want to call it exchange, encounter, and somehow Brock Lesnar is going to give up his millions of dollars and UFC contract to go back to wrestling for, what, one fight? Let's remember, people, that Brock Lesnar gave up wrestling voluntarily after only a few years. I guess maybe he just got sick of feuding with Undertaker so many times. In fact, I swear I remember after dropping the belt to Guerrero, which, of course, everyone's made the joke by now that yet another Mexican-American to beat Lesnar for the title. But I'll point out that both times were in California, too.
Uh-oh.
But anyway, before WrestleMania 20, I remember, and I may be wrong, I may be misremembering this, but I remember the story was they wanted him to feud with Undertaker again after WrestleMania 20. He's like, fuck this, I'm done with wrestling. So maybe that's got something to do with this. But at any rate, Dana White's just come out immediately after all this bullshit and said, look, he's under contract to UFC, this ain't happening. That's not to say that WWE at this point wouldn't want Lesnar to come back perhaps for one more WrestleMania fight. Point being, I just don't get how, and this is after Lashley lost a few months ago too. Lashley was undefeated in MMA, and I think he's 5-1 or so, which is almost close to Brock Lesnar's total amount of fights. Lesnar's now 5-2. So it's not his first loss, but his first since his first, so to speak. He hasn't lost in a few years. And he just lost the UFC title that he unified twice. So I don't get how one loss now and all of a sudden he's going to quit.
Well, my initial thought was, wow, what the fuck is this all about? But after watching it again and thinking about it more, I think maybe Undertaker just wants to go hunting with Lesnar. Just go on, because it's well known that Brock's going hunting for a few months or something. Maybe Undertaker just wants to join him. Maybe Undertaker didn't know what to say because he got beat up and figured I'd just, make it a little vague and say, hey, you want to do it? You want to go hunting? But no, realistically, I think Brock is really, he's a really unique type of character. I think he's crazy enough to have actually possibly have said to Vince McMahon, Vince, if I lose on Saturday, I'll talk to you about doing WrestleMania and I'll quit UFC. I think he's crazy enough. I wouldn't put that out of the possibility that he might have said something like that. Maybe Undertaker was, hoping to get a response out of him right there. There's so many ways this could have gone, but I don't think it was a big deal, or not as big deal as they're making it out to be. I don't think Lesnar's going to quit MMA anytime soon. He's too much of a competitor for that. He's making way, way, way too much money for one night of work. Like, he definitely made over $1 million total fighting on Saturday night, no question about that. He's just going to keep working on his game. He's going to come back better than ever. I don't really give a shit what these guys on the message boards are saying, all these Lesnar haters coming out and talking trash about him after this one devastating loss. He's going to come back and be better than ever. And this Undertaker thing, I won't think too much into it.
If you Internet fans want to continue to think that Brock Lesnar is going to face Undertaker at WrestleMania, and on top of that lose to make the UFC look bad, continue to keep thinking that's going to happen. There is absolutely no way, possibility this is ever going to happen. It doesn't make any sense for Lesnar to go into WrestleMania, and he's going to lose because Undertaker's not losing at WrestleMania. So all you Internet sites who want to continue to broadcast that, they can continue doing it all they want. It's not going to happen. Maybe Lesnar will come back later on, but not right now. There's no way. He's way too hot in UFC. I mean, he's on the damn cover of UFC. Dana White and Vince are not going to work together. Jackson was on WWE TV, and they referred to him as an MMA fighter. When Undertaker was on UFC TV, they said he was a WWE wrestler.
I just don't get that, like I said before, Lesnar loses one fight in a championship fight. It's not even like he's lost two fights, and one of them was to Gonzaga or Congo or some guy, like those sort of tier guys we mentioned before. This is a guy who's just come off a streak of unifying the title twice, a title that he won by defeating Randy Couture, and this has been going on a couple years. Like you said, Will, he's on the cover of magazines, video games. He's the top fucking draw in pay-per-view consistently, outside of maybe Floyd Mayweather in the past couple years, and that's all of pay-per-view, period. And it's all because of his fights in UFC. So he loses the title, and he's just going to quit and give that up, or at least risk it for, what, one stupid one-off wrestling thing? A business that he quit years ago and gave up voluntarily. So this is pretty much what they were saying about Lashley a few weeks ago. Lashley, like I mentioned before, and I don't always make these comparisons between Lesnar and Lashley, and this may be the only time, but he lost once, and it wasn't even very decisive either. He was exhausted, yes, and he clearly was done, but he wasn't submitted or knocked out either, and I think he was winning on points before that, as we covered on the show weeks ago. But he loses once, and people are like, oh, he's going to quit and go back to wrestling. I can't believe that these guys who voluntarily left wrestling and put all this time and effort into training just for these fights are just going to give it up like that because of one loss when they've been doing relatively well. What do you think, Rodney?
Lesnar's 5-2 is very different, light years ahead of Lashley's 5-1.
Oh, it is. I'm just saying that there's people were saying the same things about both of these guys after one loss. Oh, they're going to quit and go back to wrestling.
Wow. So, and just like Jay said, I think I had the same reaction when I first saw the video. What the fuck is this? It was mentioned to Dana White. He didn't know about it right after the post-fight conference about, the
right, he didn't even see it.
So, yeah. So then I'm like, all right, well, let me search for it. And I found it, and I'm just, I really watched it over maybe like 15, 20 times because I really didn't know what to make of it.
Don't you think with everyone talking about, oh, it's a work and it's a setup, well, with how paranoid wrestling and wrestling fans and wrestlers are, don't you think it's just as likely that they could have just, as they say often, quote, gone on into business for themselves? I
personally don't think it's a work. Being a competitor, there's no way after a devastating loss that I'm going to not even, on my way back to the dressing room, going to have a fake confrontation with somebody.
That wasn't a confrontation. It was a glance. If they were going to do a work, you think it would have been something a little more electric.
Or any kind of worked, stare down, glance, whatever. I don't think so. I mean, like you said, especially the state of wrestling is in right now, it's not like it's the hottest thing going right now.
Exactly. Maybe Undertaker just wanted to get people talking, and now they're talking about fucking Undertaker, the WWE guy.
Yeah. Lesnar, when he was in wrestling, you take a guy in his mid-20s making $3 million a year. This guy had his own fucking plane, all right? And he left all that because, like you said, he just said, fuck this. Seeing all these guys in the locker room beat up, he doesn't want to be the Undertaker, all right? I know the Undertaker and WWE are very protective of Undertaker's gimmick, especially now since it's still the Deadman gimmick. So in this interview, I really don't think this is how they want to start promoting this big WrestleMania match, which, by the way, we've seen on pay-per-view 3 times in Brock's career. So, again, it would be nothing new. I really don't think that they'd want that to showcase for the Undertaker, especially when Undertaker openly admits that 20 years ago he would have done MMA instead of going to WWF. So I'm sure that they would really love that.
Well, of course, because The Rock said the same thing, too. You got all these guys that were the faces of WWF in '98, Rock, Undertaker, blah, 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 saying that, well, if we had had this option years ago, we probably would have done this instead. So what looks cooler now? Undertaker probably just, I don't know, maybe if anything, if there's any sort of setup or work element to this, maybe it was just to get people talking about WWE because they need it.
Yeah, they definitely need it. I really don't know. I've read comments. This is probably one of the only things I've actually read comments on. People saying that they have legitimate beef, blah blah blah. Hey, I don't know. I really don't know the story. I don't know what to make of it. But all I know is that he's in a legit contract, and you're not going to see Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania 27, 28, 29, 30.
Well, I think he's going to need at least a handful of losses now. It's not going to be like Kimbo Slice where he loses once and they get rid of him. I think they're going to give him every chance they have before they have to absolutely cut him after, let's say, 10 fucking losses. Well, not that much, but something ridiculous for them to give this guy up.
Yeah, after one loss, we really shouldn't be talking about Brock getting cut. I mean, he lost to an undefeated fighter and a very, very talented fighter, and maybe who was overlooked. Maybe he was in Brock's shadow because everyone is so high on Brock Lesnar, the next big thing. And this is only his 7th fight. This is this guy's 7th fight. So let's get him seasoned a little bit. Now, he's going to go back to the drawing board. He's going to come back. He's going to come back strong. And guess what? He's still going to move numbers. I mean, why would he go? It's silly to even think that he's going to leave training on his own time, doing everything he wants to do, to going back on the road again after his wife just had another baby. Come on.
Even if Lesnar did go back, it wouldn't be full-time. That being said, who else can say after 4 MMA fights that they beat Randy Couture? But like you were saying, you didn't know the deal, if there was some sort of backstage thing with Undertaker, and I bet you a lot of the journalists, quote-unquote, don't either. Now, a few shows ago, I railed on wrestling journalists. I'll mention Dave Meltzer here because he does both. He covers MMA and pro wrestling, just like the Wrestling Roundtable. But I rip on sites like his and other sites for pro wrestling reporting because it's really just a bunch of gossiping for the most part. And I didn't want to sound like I'm completely ripping on him because I do respect Meltzer to a degree. I think he's got a ton of information in that head for someone who knows so much as far as facts goes. Actual tangible facts in wrestling history, lots of stuff there, and I respect the fact that he has turned this into a career. He's turned it into what he does for a living and writing all this stuff, so he does do a lot of work, and I don't know for certain if he didn't, or the Observer, whoever, didn't double-check on the Hogan Twitter story that I mentioned specifically. It just appears that way. Now, that being said, I still stand by what I said about him not reporting on everything because there's more that he knows that he's not telling you, A, and B, what he is telling you, good chance it's gossip anyway. So that being said, they were the first to jump on this Lesnar Undertaker story, and they're like, well, there's been talk that it's going to be a WrestleMania 27 match, and I just can't fathom that they would actually think that. And by they, I mean WWE. So I really just think if people are feeding him this shit, that this is what they're actually talking about. Maybe they're just told to feed him it. I don't know. But you wanted to compare this to, like, since we talked about wrestling journalism, Rodney, you wanted to have your piece on MMA journalism because I said on that show that MMA journalism ain't that much better.
No, it's really not. It really is a lot of gossip. All right, who's going to fight next? The next fight, rumors, injuries, this and that. But the one thing that kind of irks me about MMA journalism, almost same thing in wrestling. People like to jump to conclusions.
The biggest example lately has been the Vitor Belfort thing. 1 week. Or, I'm sorry, not even 1 week. One day he's got a leg injury and he can't compete, and the next, oh no, he's fine and he's actually fighting Anderson Silva Super Bowl weekend. What the fuck? How do you go from one to... That's a big leap.
Exactly, and they're posting these headlines, Vitor Belfort out, and automatically think, oh my God, is he fucking injured, this guy? And then you come to find out that he's actually replacing Charles Sonnen at the Super Bowl pay-per-view. Maybe because the sport is so young that a lot of these MMA journalists really think that they could beat Joe Silva or Dana White, and they nitpick and criticize everything instead of letting the sport evolve. Like all these MMA hardcores, all these like MMA quote-unquote experts. I mean, it's really hard to be an expert in a sport so young. You really have to let the sport grow. For example, like Brock losing. Yes, Brock's been exposed, and people say, oh, maybe he wasn't the guy that we thought of. Oh, really? All right, let's see. Let's compare it to football. The Jets lost their first game, and, even sports journalism in general, everyone's like, oh, my God, the Jets, they're so overrated, bro. I can't believe people think they could be a Jets championship team. Now they've first place in the AFC. People, they're right back on the bandwagon. oh my God, these guys are going to be on the Super Bowl. Brock wins his next fight, it's going to be the same thing. Brock is back. Oh my God, he's learned so much. They could put him up against freaking Joe Schmo the Ho, and people are going to be all over Lesnar. I mean, people sit there, these journalists, they complain, but yet they still watch. And a lot of these articles, I feel like it's more complaining than reporting.
I'll tell you my problem with MMA journalism, aside from the gossip, as we mentioned. This is a growing sport, as you mentioned. So to appeal to hopefully new fans, especially with the crossover for pro wrestling like the Lashley and Lesnar and hopefully Batista soon, if you want to educate people on your sport, you need to give them details. And by that I mean you'll often try and read about a certain fight coming up or fight results or whatever, and some of these guys, they'll include the records for a lot of these guys, but more often than not, you don't see what weight divisions there are. And for, let's say, the uninitiated, that's a lot to consider, and I think a lot of people get intimidated by not knowing the structure of how the sport actually goes, and I think that they do a disservice to their supposed growing sport and passion by not making people privy to that sort of thing. And you'll see that I try and correct that when I do our reporting on WrestlingRoundtable.com. Don't you think that's a factor too, Rod?
Yeah, I think detail is really key, especially when you have new people coming into the sport every single day. I mean, the more exposure you get, like, look how much exposure this past pay-per-view has got between ESPN and Versus. I mean, everybody knows the result. They know what happened, not even the next day. To educate more people, I think that's something that MMA journalists really need to consider. Let's educate people instead of just trying to make gossip. I feel like everyone is trying to be TMZ, and it's not going to work. If you want to help the sport, report details. Don't try to hurt it.
Moving on to pro wrestling in a minute. Before I do that, a couple things. First of all, bringing on Midge. Hello, Midge.
Oh, what's up, guys?
Want to do some poll results now. MMA question and a couple wrestling questions. And our last poll, new polls now are on WrestlingRoundtable.com. One MMA, one wrestling, and somewhat outdated now, but at the time it wasn't. Who should Frank Mir face next? Big Nogueira, Minotauro. I still think I'm the only one who really wants to see that fight, and the results here agreed. Only 8% Big Nog. Of course, now we kind of have an idea who Mir is going to face next, but moving on to the rest of the poll, this was also before the Carwin and Nelson fight was set up and since destroyed because Carwin's going to have back surgery now. Roy Nelson got 11%, Shane Carwin got 15%. 29% of the vote said that Frank Mir should face reality next. Pretty cruel. The majority, 37%, said Frank Mir should face the loser of Lesnar Velasquez. Well, it seems as if that's probably going to happen. Looks like Mir-Lesnar 3 is going to be the money match, and maybe the winner will get back into title contention. Now, moving on to pro wrestling. Who will be the biggest breakout star of the supposed youth movement in WWE? A lot of people to choose from, and one of them is not Alberto Del Rio. I did not include him on purpose because he may be a fresh face in the main event scene, at least on SmackDown. I wouldn't exactly call him part of the youth movement. Maybe you'll disagree with that, but as it is, R-Truth, 0%. So no one thinks that he's going to break out. Caval, Dolph Ziggler, and Jack Swagger all got 1% of the vote. Kofi Kingston, 2%. Evan Bourne, 3%. Drew McIntyre, 4%. Wade Barrett, 7%. Pretty far down for a guy who's seemingly on the verge, and a lot of people are into. John Morrison, people are still holding out for John Morrison, 9%. Sheamus, 12%. Daniel Bryan, 21%. And the overwhelming majority, no surprise, voted for The Miz, 39%. Perhaps deservingly so. And putting up that question made me think, well, if this youth movement is true, isn't it a little late? or maybe a lot late, because there were so many guys that we thought should have been main eventing by now, and I think they're all gone at this point since the poll's been up. Yeah, all but maybe 4 or so of these choices are gone from WWE, moved on. Gregory Helms, 1% of the vote. 2 juniors, Ted DiBiase Jr. and Chavo Guerrero Jr., along with Paul London, all garnered 2% of the vote. Ken Kennedy got 3%. My Mercy vote actually got a lot of votes. Chris Masters got 4% of the vote. 5% to Carlito. 6% to the recently departed Matt Hardy. Elijah Burke and MVP got 8%. Christian, second place in 19%. And again, much like The Miz, there was one guy who was getting more votes than anybody, as you might be able to guess, and that was Shelton Benjamin. 40% of the vote. Should have been main eventing long ago, according to our poll. New polls now on WrestlingRoundtable.com. And so, moving on to WWE Bragging Rights. What we were saying the day before, Will, was that there's no way that they're going to make much money on this show. Not only is it practically a C show for WWE, they always do badly, not just against UFC, period. If they put a pay-per-view on the day after UFC, they never do well. Even WrestleMania this year. So that's just a standard UFC show with their own guys. When you do a show the day after a Lesnar fight, I think they're going to really tank on this one. What do you think?
And the worst part was, it was actually a really, really good show. That's until at least the last match. It was actually a really good show. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, the problem is when you talk about a trophy that doesn't exist for 11 months, it's kind of pointless. That's one of the biggest problems with that kind of show. And also, it kills Survivor Series because you just did the same format that you're going to do in a month later.
I really don't understand the placement of this. They've done this a couple of years now where they have the big tag match, and I just don't get why they don't do it a month or the next pay-per-view later.
To me, if they were going to do something like that, why not have like a 2 Raw Survivor Series, 2 SmackDown Survivor Series, and then have one of those, the winners of the matches go against each other or something like that to build that kind of brand separation. But it doesn't do much, and the match was good, but it was just like there was no point, and especially after that, I was already tired from the previous night, and then we had tapings, and then I had to watch this, and I was like, I was already beat up. I agree with that. It's not money-making decisions for WWE. They don't need all these pay-per-views. They don't need 14 shows. I mean, if
that's why
money,
they're doing it. They still are making money on it, just not much.
Yeah, that's the thing. If they're making money on it, then they're making money. They're not going to stop it unless they're not making money on it.
Right. It's not an overwhelming turnout for them on these pay-per-views. They're millions each, but not nearly WrestleMania level. Or the pay-per-view buy rates have been dropping this year for a lot of the B shows as well. Even SummerSlam and WrestleMania, the main shows, they have not been doing as well as they have the past couple of years. Why do you think that is, Midge?
First of all, these things are crazy expensive, and if they're doing it for kids, like when we were kids, it was what?
I can barely hear you, Midge. Are you? What's going on with your phone?
Yeah, I unplugged it. Is that better?
That's much better.
Yeah, for some reason when it's got the charger on it. Anyway, like I was saying, when we were kids, it was like what, $20-25 for the pay-per-view.
Mm-hmm.
So what we did was, you had 3 or 4 friends come over, you had $5 a piece, and you had a pay-per-view, and your parents didn't bitch. Probably a lot of parents aren't showing out $50 for their kids to watch wrestling every month.
Well, see, WWE's strategy to counteract the buy rates not doing so well is A, do a lot more of the gimmick pay-per-views because people came out for that, at least initially. The Hell in a Cells, Elimination Chambers, Money in the Bank. You can see they've rebranded their pay-per-views to be more of these gimmick-selling pay-per-views, A, and B, raise the pay-per-view prices. So those two in concert, at least for the first year, seem to counteract the dropping buy rates compared to a few years ago. But this year, I don't know if it's going to turn out so well. They do have an investors conference coming up. What do you think, Jay?
Yeah, I agree. The prices are through the roof, and you're oversaturating the market with wrestling, which isn't even hot right now. To top that off, you put these title fights on, they don't build them up too much. There's nothing really behind them. Sure, the Bragging Rights match was pretty good. I got to give it that. But in general, they really needed to do something different to create more of an awareness of their product. And maybe the stand up for WWE thing is something that they're trying, but the pay-per-view hits are just going to keep coming if they keep this up.
Dominic from Staten Island, hello.
Hey guys, I didn't see Bragging Rights because I don't really have much interest in the B pay-per-views. I just stick to the main four.
Mm-hmm. An outdated concept, but one that we hold on to.
Yeah, but as far as the gimmick pay-per-views, I actually think that's a good idea, but I agree with what I believe his name was Mitch said about them being overpriced. $45, I think the B pay-per-views are. Survivor Series, you could almost consider that a gimmick pay-per-view.
Sure. So and the Rumble is as well.
Yeah, if these other pay-per-views are working reverse the way we like the Big Four to have worked, whereas they were gimmick pay-per-views that slowly, especially Survivor Series, just became a regular pay-per-view, where the other ones, the Money in the Banks, they used to be called, Fully Loaded and Judgment Day. They sound like bad Steven Seagal action movies. Then they slowly became the gimmick pay-per-views. The Elimination Chamber is the only one that I think I might take an interest in next year.
Well, the gimmick pay-per-views, initially it was working. I don't know if it is right now. Jason from Brooklyn, hello.
Hello, Eric. I didn't see Bragging Rights. What's the point? They set it up for next pay-per-view, but I didn't think I would see a turn or anything like that. If anything, there was the one match I did want to see was the Ziggler and Danielson match.
Mm-hmm. Surprisingly, not a unification match. I thought with all the title unifications they've been doing, this would be the one, but apparently they're keeping with, I don't know if tradition's the right word, but what they did last year, just a straight champion match. Maybe they'll do it down the line.
With nothing on the line there, that was a really entertaining match. And I really hate to give credit to your boy there, but he did well.
The problem is we've had two callers already call in that they didn't see the show. I mean, I understand why they didn't do it, but the Daniel Bryan match really reminded me of like a perfect Bret Hart match. And I saw a surfboard being used. I haven't seen that in a long time. What a great match. And on Raw, too, they had another great one, too. So the reason why they have 5-minute matches on Raw, because they give them 20-minute matches on a pay-per-view. So they gave them a lot of time to work and gave a really good match, probably one of the best matches of the year. I'm dead serious on that. If you didn't watch it, shame on you, because you missed a good one. That's why I'm saying a lot of people are calling and saying, hey, I didn't see the show because it wasn't worth my money, but yet we could talk about maybe 4 matches on that show that were really good. So you know what? If you all don't want to pay for it, you're missing out because you're missing all the good wrestling. And I could say that for the last few shows. But no one watches it, so you can't really be a judge on WWE television, when you don't watch the main pay-per-views. There's a reason why they're $40, because you get some pretty good matches on the card, even though they may not be built. They may not be built right, but they still perform. Yeah,
what do you want to say, Mitch?
I'm in shock at how much I agree with Will right now. This is the best point he's ever. This is the best point I've ever heard you make. This is great.
Oh, good. I'm going to put another wall. I'm putting myself on the wall right now.
Okay, well then, let me hear your thoughts, you two specifically, I guess, and Jay too, on the hot-shotting of the tag titles with the Cena, Otunga, Nexus thing going on, of course, and a lot of people were like, when Drew McIntyre and Cody Rhodes won it, good, they're doing it with some new guys, but then they just do this really quick title switch, and then by quick, I mean they lose it on Raw the next day.
Would you rather have Cody Rhodes and McIntyre have the belts, or would you rather have it in Nexus? I prefer Nexus. I don't care much about Cody Rhodes and McIntyre being champions. They don't need it. They weren't really established as a tag team. The belts already lost privilege when the Hart Dynasty lost it. Now this might actually have some legit,
you mean
help
prestige?
Because, yeah, thank you. It might have some prestige by putting it on a heel tag team, a heel stable that can defend it. And it just seems more logical to me, and, you can give the belt some credibility having, 2 new fresh guys that makes sense being on a tag team.
It was the only way to do it. That's what they wanted to do, and they made I think it was more of a hot shot move to put up the belt on Cody Rhodes and Drew McIntyre in the first place. But,
Fair enough.
And they needed John Cena to wrestle on the show, so they pretty much Yeah, they needed him to wrestle in some way, shape, or form, because you talk about how much money people spend. A lot of these parents who buy these pay-per-views for the kids, they're going to watch it with them. They're going to say, well, why isn't John Cena wrestling? We just spent $50. We're not even getting to see the biggest star in the company wrestle. So that was a last-minute, I guess, decision that they made to try to get the belts on the Nexus and give them a little more awareness, I guess. But, WWE is notorious for doing shit like this, so I'm not really surprised at all.
Where do you think this whole Cena-Nexus angle is going, Midge?
Well, you see, I got to disagree with Jay on this and being a last-minute thing. I think it actually shows some promise that they're thinking for the future. They got Cena involved in the pay-per-view. That was great. But then the next night, they had an angle to completely bring the tag titles to the main front. It's on Raw. It's in the main angle on Raw. Now people are paying attention to the titles. Now the Nexus can go from Raw to SmackDown. They can go wherever they want. They can take over anything they want. I think for once they were actually thinking ahead, and it might actually turn out pretty well.
But did they plan this ahead of time? Like, did they think of this a month ago, or did they think of this on Saturday and say, "Oh, this is a good idea"? Because I agree with you. It's not really a bad idea at all. But it's just they didn't announce the match. You know, maybe if you knew John Cena was wrestling, more people would have bought the show. You know what I mean? If they would have announced the match on Raw, it might have had a little more promise to sell some pay-per-views.
Then you're kind of killing the whole thing with Cena and the main event. You're going to put focus on the tag belts. Because first of all, it's a heel group versus a heel group. So that doesn't really sell pay-per-view anyway. That won't really sell anything. Cena's focused on Wade Barrett's situation. You can't really have him do two different things. You know, it would be too confusing for many people. So to have a surprise match, which, by the way, is another selling point to a pay-per-view where you get another match that you would not see on TV and you didn't know about it, it does bring a little bit more surprise to the fact that match happened. I think that was planned, but they didn't announce it to take away from the main event with Cena and Barrett.
As soon as they announced Cena's partner, I was like, oh, it should be Gabriel. Gabriel's the best one. But now that they made Otunga the partner, it shows the dissension with Wade Barrett and stuff like that, so it advances that storyline too.
That's why I think they did that, because they wanted to advance Otunga's kind of agreeing with Cena a little bit more. He might actually take sides with Cena on a couple of things. You know, that's why I think they did that.
Abe from Augusta, Georgia. Let's hear your thoughts on Bragging Rights now.
It was a decent show. Opening was actually pretty good. One problem I did have with the tag match is just my opinion. If they were going to win the belts in the first place, they should have had a hard time to keep it until Bragging Rights, so that way how when Nexus beat them, it would have been the bigger, I guess, appeal to the match if you're going to promote it, but that's just my opinion. And as far as the 7-on-7 match, I would have preferred that, like, what's that guy, Swagger? Or another young guy? Yes, I said Swagger. Beat, like, the Miz, so that would have be more of a youth theme instead of the same old two guys. Rey Mysterio on the edge. We're retiring probably 2 years if you're going to go all the way with the youth movement.
Hey, those two were former tag champions 8 years ago.
Yeah, but of course they don't recognize it.
There was a lot of youth in that match. I know a lot of people saw it, but there was a lot of youth in that match.
I saw it, but they got beat first.
He's talking about who you see at the end triumphant, though.
Well, they're always going to have the bigger guys at the end. That's always going to happen. That's just the way it is. It's established stars are always going to be the one to win.
Not if you want to build new stars.
I wouldn't say so much. Is Miz a youth star now, or is he a main event player?
Well, he should be the latter.
Well, that's why he was the last one in the ring.
That's why he's lost 3 pay-per-views in a row too.
Doesn't need to win. He has the Money in the Bank briefcase. He can lose 1,000 times. All you have to do is cash in that briefcase, and that's it.
So it's like M. Bison in Street Fighter. You can lose 1,000,000 times, but all it counts is that one time you win.
Of course.
You lost me on that one.
Well, let's bring back Motto's question about Shawn Michaels, if he was around still. Do you think that they'd be doing this Kane feud, or would Shawn Michaels be doing something with Undertaker for the 3rd time, I guess, building up to WrestleMania?
No. I cannot see that happening a 3rd time. It just it kills the magic. And he would be on Raw anyway. He would not be on SmackDown. Let's just start that off. You know, and right now, if anything, he probably would have been either a Nexus. I couldn't see that being the guy who helped him get in it, or he could have been like helping with Cena, trying to get them out. You know, plus it would have been interesting to see Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart on a team at SummerSlam. That would have been kind of interesting.
Undertaker flew from Anaheim, California to Minneapolis to do this show, and funny enough, staring at Lesnar, both of them would lose to a Kane this weekend. This is the third time that Kane has buried Undertaker alive.
Well, Nexus coming out surprised me. I didn't think Nexus would get involved, considering they're not on SmackDown. And there's probably something building here because, again, Otunga said on Raw, we'll tell you the real reason why we attacked The Undertaker. So there's something there. They're going to keep that fresh. So we don't know yet. And I think that's going to build it up to possibly WrestleMania. I wouldn't be surprised if the whole Nexus thing goes to WrestleMania.
Right.
You know, they feel like they're building that way. You know, or else they wouldn't attack The Undertaker like that.
Well, Keith Slater is Kane's child with Lita. I want you to know that. That's why that happened.
Let's bring on another call. 403 area code. Name and location, please.
What's up? My name is Eric. I'm from Calgary, Alberta, Canada.
All right. Canadian call. What do you got?
Yeah, Bret Hart country.
Ooh. Yeah, Bret Hart country. I just want to say I love your guys' show. It's definitely very, very awesome.
Thank you very much.
Awesome, like the Miz.
I'm kind of dejected about Carwin pulling out. What do you guys think about Cro Cop stepping up and saying he's going to fight Big Country?
I think that Nelson would have a better shot against him than he would against Carwin. I would have liked to see. I was disappointed today when I read Carwin wasn't going to be fighting Nelson because I just got tickets to that show, and I'd really, even though I like Big Nelson, Big Country Roy Nelson, unlike Pat on our message board, always gives him shit. I'm a Roy Nelson fan, and even though he was probably going to get destroyed, I would think, by those strikes, it still is a name fight. And I'm thinking, well, geez, if they're going to go for Lesnar Mir 3, who do they have now? Because obviously Dos Santos, who just beat Nelson for the number one contendership, is going to be fighting Velasquez next. Who do they have that's ready? And if Cro Cop's going to step up, I think that's a little better fight for Roy Nelson. What do you think, Jay?
I agree. Roy Nelson definitely has a shot, especially with the way Cro Cop fought last time against Frank Mir, man. He really didn't show us anything. And the past couple of fights before that, he showed us at least something. You know, he threw some strikes. But, Roy Nelson definitely has a shot to win this fight. Interesting news about Cro Cop, too. There was I saw some banter on the message board today that he was talking trash, apparently, about Brock Lesnar.
Please.
All he said really was that he doesn't feel Brock Lesnar is a mixed martial artist. He just said he's a wrestler. That's all he does is smother people. So
that's coming from the kickboxer.
Right, yeah. I don't know if Cro Cop is trying to get his name in the hat somehow, because you know how when fighters start talking shit about each other, that tends to make people, want to see a fight. Back to the original question, I think Cro Cop is smart for trying to get his name out there again and trying to jump onto a fight as soon as possible. Yeah, he definitely does.
Wade Barrett's first one-on-one main event. How do you think he fared, Will?
I don't think the match was built up the right way. I mean, it wasn't that exciting like the Cena versus Wade Barrett fight. I think that one was better. John Cena was actually probably the problem. I think he was just out there doing absolutely nothing, and it wasn't that much fun because he really wasn't doing much. So I don't think Barrett got to show off that much in this match. I think that's why it really didn't work for me, because the moment he said that if I don't win this match, you're fired, that killed the whole match for me because I already knew it was going to happen. The announcement of that alone was kind of disappointing. It wasn't a great wrestling match. Nothing stood out for it. I think the next showing at Survivor Series will probably be a better match. I don't even think both men were happy with that. I don't think they could be.
You think Wade Barrett needs some more time to cook, to quote Bill Cosby, Midge?
It was definitely the most forgettable match of the night, but you threw on a rookie out there with Randy Orton, who doesn't exactly get other people over besides himself, so, I mean, he's good. He'll be fine in the future, but he needs definitely some seasoning. Cena, I would agree with Will again. Cena was just out there being a nuisance in the way just for no reason. That's a big deal, though, because we've talked on the show many times, just recently even, about how important the main event story unfolds and match. The main event is your last impression of the night. Just even last year when we went to lockdown in the Liacouras Center, which was the same building Bellator was at this year. It was a good show,
But then that Sting Mick Foley match really stunk up the place, and it was terrible. And I think it really poisoned or ruined a lot of impressions of our crew who went. And I was like, well, what are you talking about? The show wasn't that good. It was a really good show up until that, but that's your lasting impression of the night. That's the last thing that you remember. So that's how important it is. Your thoughts, Jay?
Yeah, I pretty much echo their comments on that match. Wade Barrett definitely needs more time to get adjusted to. He needs more in-ring time. That's basically all it is, man. He gets thrown into a main event position with God knows how much experience in situations like that. Probably none. Randy Orton always wrestles the same matches. His moves are pretty predictable. But like Will said, they basically just gave away the result of this match right before.
They telegraphed it.
Yeah, big time. You know, I knew it was going to happen. Granted, the ending was pretty cool. I didn't mind the ending. It kind of picked up the pace a little bit. But all in all, for a pay-per-view main event, especially if you spent, $45, $50 on it, it definitely wasn't worth it.
254 in Oklahoma, I believe. Last thing we'll do tonight.
Do y'all think that WWE is going to turn CM Punk face anytime soon? Because he's been getting a bunch of big pops lately.
There's no reason to turn Punk face. He's one of the best heels we got on the whole show.
All right. More on the message board, I suppose, because we got to go for now. And next time, in a couple weeks or so, we'll talk about all the latest goings-on in mixed martial arts and pro wrestling. In the meantime, please sign up for the newsletter, message board, and everything else you can get on WrestlingRoundtable.com. Next time, we'll talk about Irv Mushnick's book about the Chris Benoit murders, Chris and Nancy being turned into a film soon. And this will also be the post-election time for Linda McMahon. So how will Stand Up for WWE affect that campaign? If she wins or loses, we'll talk about it on Wrestling Roundtable Radio. So for the panel of Midge, Jay Aletto, Will Vafides, Rodney LeConte, I'm the host, Eric Santamaria. Thank you for calling in, and join us on WrestlingRoundtable.com.